Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today, we are continuing our series on Emerson's journal collection number 32, dating from the year 1841, and we are up to May of that year. And this particular section begins with a editor's note, and I'll start by reading that. Here follow passages on genius and on talent, which are printed in The Method of Nature, pages 204 and 218. The following reference to Miss Mary Moody Emerson occurs in the journal in the middle of the latter passage. May 4th. Aunt Mary, whose letters I read all yesterday afternoon, is genius always new, subtle, frolicsome, musical, unpredictable. All your learning of all literatures and states of society, Platonistic, Calvinistic, English, or Chinese, would never enable you to anticipate one thought or expression. She is embarrassed by no Moses or Paul, no Angelo or Shakespeare, after whose type she is to fashion her speech. Her wit is the wild horse of the desert, who snuffs the sirocco and scours the palm grove without having learned his places in the stadium or at Tattersall's. What liberal, joyful architecture, liberal and manifold as the vegetation from the earth's bosom, or the creations of frostwork on the window. Nothing can excel the freedom and felicity of her letters. Such nobility is in this self-rule, this absence of all reference to style or standard. It is the march of the mountain winds, the waving of flowers, or the flight of birds. But a man can hardly be a reader of books without acquiring their average tone, as one who walks with a military procession involuntarily falls into step. In every family is its own little body of literature, divinity, and personal biography, a common stock which their education and circumstance have furnished, and from which they all draw allusion and illustration to their conversation, whilst it would be unintelligible, at least in the emphasis given to it, to a stranger. Thus, in my youth, after we had brought home Don Juan, and learned to pester Aunt Mary with grave repetition of the lines from the shipwreck, "They grieved for those who perished in the cutter, and likewise for the biscuit casks and butter." These became the byword for the mean spirit of derision that characterized the present age, in contrast with the alleged earnest and religious spirit of the Puritans, and especially the austere saints of Concord and Malden she was so swift to remember. I find a letter of hers to Charles, dated Waterford, October 1831, "Oh, could you be here this afternoon? Not a creature but the dog and me. We don't go to 4 days' meeting. There's been one at the Methodist, closing today, and such a rush from the other society. But such a day! Here's one balm of Gilead tree, but a few leaves left, as though on purpose to catch the eye to see them play in the wind day after day. And the deserted nest. Ah, where are its anxious parents and their loved brood? Dead? Where the mysterious principle of life? Past 9 o'clock. The vision of beauty has changed. A white mist has risen which hides the venerable mount, but shows the trees and fine picturesque, and the deserted nest is sheltered with a soft pall, like the oblivion which rests on the miseries of the wretched. Just after the house was left for the evening vigils at the chapel, a man came for me to write a note he was going to carry. The peculiarity of notes here is a friend asks for another's conversion. Thus the best of human feelings are brought into action. But note the crackers. I brought down by mistake the only pen which is good of the four, one which I don't use to you or Brother S., and I persuaded him to shorten his petitions. And, as he was satisfied, surely there was no harm. And here comes a living voice. The charm, too, is gone for the moon. She rides full brightly. The tarn has gathered her misty wanderers in her bosom, and the trees stretch their naked arms to the skies like the scathed martyrs of persecution. New England Theology. The new relations we form are apt to prefer as our own ties to those natural ones which they have supplanted. Yet how strict these are! We must learn later, when we recall our childhood and youth with vivid affection, and feel a poignant solitude even in the multitude of modern friends. In reading these letters of MME, I acknowledge, with surprise that I could never forget it, the debt of myself and my brothers to that old religion which, in those years, still dwelt like a Sabbath peace in the country population of New England, which taught privation, self-denial, and sorrow. A man was born, not for prosperity, but to suffer for the benefit of others, like the noble rock maple tree which all around the villages bleeds for the service of man. Not praise, not men's acceptance of our doing, but the Spirit's holy errand through us, absorbed the thought. How dignified is this, how all that is called talents and worth in Paris and in Washington dwindles before it, how our friendships and the complaisances we use shame us now. They withdraw, they disappear, and the gay and accomplished associates, and our elder company, the dear children and grave relatives with whom we played and studied and repented, they return and join hands again. I feel suddenly that my life is frivolous and public. I am as one turned out of doors. I live in a balcony or on the street. I would fain quit my present companions, as if they were thieves or pot companions, and betake myself to some Thebes or Mount Athos, and the depths of New Hampshire or Maine, to bewail my innocency and to recover it, and with it the power to commune again with these sharers of a more sacred idea. I value Andover, Yale, and Princeton as altars of this same old fire, though I fear they have done burning cedar and sandalwood there also, and have learned to use chips and pine. But I meant to say above that we are surprised to find that we are solitary, that what is holiest in our character and faculty is unappreciated by those who stand around us, and so lies uncalled for and dormant, and that it needs that our dear ghosts should return, or such as they, to challenge us to right combats. Charles and Edward. I ought to record the pleasure I found amid all this letter reading and some letters to CCE from his college mates, and the uniform tone of affection and respect with which these boys, for such they still were, accost him. Edward also was respected, admired by his mates, but, I suspect, never loved, not comprehended, not felt. He puzzled them. Yet I still remember with joy Charles's remark when he returned from visiting Edward at Porto Rico, that the tone of conversation there was the most frivolous and low that could be, yet that Edward never suffered anything unworthy to be said in his presence, without speaking for the right, and so good-humoredly and so well, as invariably to command respect, and to be a check on the company. But Charles always, from his school days, had this following, and that of the best who were about him. It was true, leal service, homage to something noble and superior, which the giver felt it was a compliment to himself to pay. Thus he brought boarders to the houses where he went, to Danforth's in Cambridge, and Pelletier's in Boston. May 6th. These letters revive my fated purpose of writing the oft-requested memoir of Charles. That certainly would have been unfit. It was right for the young and the dear friend to ask. It had been wrong in me to undertake. The very nobleness of the promise should make us more reluctant to recite the disappointment of the promise. Let us not stoop to write the annals of sickness and disproportion. Charles delighted in strength, in grace, in poetry, in success. Shall we wrong him so far as to make him the unwilling object of pity, the center of a group of pain, a caryatid statue in our temple of destiny? Yet now, as I read these yellowing letters of Aunt Mary, I begin to entertain the project in a new form. I doubt if the interior and spiritual history of New England could be trulier told than through the exhibition of family history such as this, the picture of this group of Aunt Mary and the boys, mainly Charles. The genius of that woman, the key to her life, is in the conflict of the new and the old ideas in New England. The air of whatever was rich and profound and efficient in thought and emotion in the old religion which planted and peopled this land. She strangely united to this passionate piety the fatal gifts of penetration, a love of philosophy, and impatience of words, and was thus a religious skeptic. She held on with both hands to the faith of the past generation as to the palladium of all that was good and hopeful in the physical and metaphysical worlds, and in all companies and on all occasions, and especially with these darling nephews of her hope and pride, extolled and poetized this beloved Calvinism. Yet all the time she doubted and denied it, and could not tell whether to be more glad or sorry to find that these boys were irredeemably born to the adoption and furtherance of the new ideas. She reminds me of Margaret Graham, the enthusiast and Scots abbot, who lives to infuse into the young Roland her enthusiasm for the Roman Church, only that our Margaret doubted whilst she loved. Milton and Young were the poets endeared to the generation she represented. Of Milton they were proud, but I fancy their religion has never found so faithful a picture as in the Night Thoughts. These combined traits in Aunt Mary's character gave the new direction to her hope that these boys should be richly and holily qualified and bred to purify the old faith of what narrowness and error adhered to it, and import all its fire into the new age. Such a gift should her Prometheus bring to men. She hated the poor, low, thin, unprofitable, unpoetical humanitarians as the devastators of the church and robbers of the soul, and never wearies with piling on them new terms of slight and weariness. Ah, she said, what a poet would Byron have been if he had been born and bred a Calvinist. Sunday. Beautiful, eloquent day, rich with more than I have skill to tell, though I have attempted it in verses. We rightly call the woods enchanting, they so confound all our measures and upset our whole system of tradition. Here reigns eternal Sabbath, and the hours so ample and profound they seem to stretch to centuries. How far off is man and his works! Babylon and Britain draw very near together, and are not to be discriminated. The circumstance is here emphatically felt to be nothing. The present age will perhaps be characterized long hence by the importance now for several centuries attached to two words, namely gentleman and Christian. Yet see how this is the prevalence or inundation of an idea and not of any person or purpose. Who did this? Who elevated these two words to their dignity in the metaphysical and practical world? Was any man a party to this exaggeration? Plainly no man, but all men. Well, there is no fact and no thought which shall not equally come in turn to the top and be celebrated. General Harrison was neither Whig nor Tory, but the indignation president. And what was not at all surprising in this puny generation, he could not stand the excitement of 17 millions of people, but died of the presidency in 1 month. A man should have a heart and a trunk vascular and on the scale of the aqueducts or the cloaca maxima of Rome to bear the friction of such a Mississippi stream. The dewdrops, which are only superficial, what a depth do they give to the aspect of the morning meadows as you walk! So do manners, so do social talents to frivolous society. We know as little of men as we do of plants. We doubt not that every weed in our soil hath its uses, and each no doubt excellent and admirable uses. Yet now how poorly they figure in our materia medica, and is not a man better than a mullein or a buckthorn? I walked in my dream with a pundit who said, he could not speak with me many words, for the life of incarnate natures was short, but that the vice of men was old age, which they ought never to know. For though they should see 10 centuries, yet would they be younger than the waters, which hearken unto their sound. How young is it, and yet how old? Neither, said he, ought men ever to accept grief from any external event, for poverty, death, deluges, fires are flaws of cold wind, or a passing vapor which do not affect a constant soul. He added that as the river flows and the plant flows or emits odors, and the sun flows or radiates, and the mind is a stream of thoughts, so was the universe the emanation of God. Therefore, he added, they mistake who seek to find only one meaning in sacred words and images in the name of gods, as Jove, Apollo, Osiris, Vishnu, Odin, or in the sacred names of Western Europe, and its colonies as Jesus and the Holy Ghost. For these symbols are like coins of different countries, adopted from local proximity or convenience, and getting their cipher from some forgotten accident, the name of a consul or the whim of a goldsmith, but they all represent the value of corn, wool, and labor, and are readily convertible into each other or into the coin of any new country. That sense which is conveyed to one man by the name and rites of Pan or Jehovah is found by another in the study of earthquakes and floods, by another in the forms and habits of animals, by a third in trade or in politics, by a fourth in electromagnetism. Let a man not resist the law of his mind, and he will be filled with the divinity which flows through all things. He must emanate, he must give all he takes, nor desire to appropriate and to stand still. He also said that the doctrine of pantheism, or the omnipresence of God, would avail to abolish the respect of circumstance, or the treating all things after the laws of time and place, and would accustom men to a profounder insight. Thus, hospitality, he said, was an external fact. The troops of guests who succeed each other as inmates of our houses and messmates at our tables week after week are recording angels who inspect and report our domestic behavior, our temperance, our conversation, and manners. Therefore, the pure in heart, having nothing to hide, are the most hospitable, or keep always open house. But to those who have somewhat to conceal, every guest is unwelcome. A man is a gate betwixt hell and heaven. Through his heart streams a procession, when he wills good of all angels and mites, when he wills evil of all cattle and devils. Thou saidst of thy heart just now that it was cold, that it was broken, and thou wonderest why God should create it to be pained, and other the like things. What is the heart but the power to give and receive, which varies every moment with the action? Whoso blesseth all beings, or any being, to him, to her, bend all the world of spirits, as the brothers' sheaves to Joseph's sheaf. Whoso curseth any, by word or deed, from him, from her, all spirits in all worlds turn their backs. You cannot will without turning the key of nature, and opening or shutting the door of light and of darkness. There where you are, create value, and you publish yourself on the wings of every wind. Every ray of light becomes your advertisement, and all souls shall bid on you until your just wages are paid. I owe to genius always the same debt of lifting the curtain from the common, and showing me that gods are sitting disguised in this seeming gang of gypsies and peddlers. And why should I owe it to a book or a friend, and not myself pierce the thin incognito? A question I may well ask, but I must ask it of my hands and of my will. Holiness is the only stair to the mount of God. Yet am I continually tempted to sacrifice genius to talent, the hope and promise of insight, through the sole door of better being, to the lust of a freer play and demonstration of those gifts I have. We seek that pleasurable excitement which unbinds our faculties and gives us every advantage for the display of that skill we possess, and we buy this freedom to glitter by the loss of general health. Humility, patience, abstinence, mortification, nakedness, stripping off these clothes of law, custom, fortune, and friends, they can teach a philosophy, a rhetoric, and a poetry which the world has not heard these 1,000 years. Coffee is good for talent, but genius wants prayer. Dost thou not fear that this perception, so keen of right and wrong thou hast, of the true and the ridiculous and reform, will sometime vanish and not be, and dost thou not wish to hold it to thee? I know thou dost. Do then what thou knowest. What is strong but goodness, and what is energetic but the presence of a good man? It is time that this doctrine of the presence, the crystal sphere of thought, is as concentrical as the geological globe we inhabit. The various matters which men magnify, as trade, law, creeds, sciences, paintings, coins, manuscripts, histories, poems, are all pieces of virtue, which serve well enough to unfold the talents of the man, but are all diversions from the insight of the soul. Saints' worship is one of these. The worship of Mahomet or Jesus, like all the rest, a fine field of ingenuity wherein to construct theories. a fine capacious platform whereon to build institutions and societies, poetry, eloquence, and reputation, nay, a drug, a specific for the present distress, a crutch for fainting virtue, a lozenge for the sick, but, seriously and sadly considered, a remedy more dangerous than the disease. The soul will none of this roving. Why goest thou boswellizing this saint or that? It is lèse majesté, it is the razor to the throat. Here art thou with whom so long the universe travailed in labor. Darest thou to think meanly of thyself, thee whom thy stalwart fate brought forth to unite his ragged sides, to shoot the gulf, to reconcile the erst irreconcilable? As long as thou magnifiest anything, thou accusest thyself of trifling, of dallying and postponing thine own deed. For when once thou graspest the handles of thy plough, thou wilt put all names behind thee, as living nature forces us to put all dead bodies under ground. In the infinite disparity between the soul and any one incarnation of it, thou holiest and grandest, all differences between one and another disappear. They have no parallax at a distance so vast. In every pulse of virtue, in every revelation, though slightest, of the soul affirmeth the kingdom of the universe, the descent of itself into man. May 28th. Can I not learn that there is nothing settled in manners? Good sense is the leader of fashion as of everything else. A man has strong sense to write or to command armies, but he makes no figure in society simply because there his sense does not work, is dismounted by his self-consciousness or excessive desire to please or some other superstition. But the reason why he yields so readily to the victors of the carpet is that he feels and sees that they carry the matter more sensibly than he. Editor's note. In this letter to Carlyle, May 30th, Mr. Emerson said, quote, "One reader and friend of yours dwells now in my house, and, as I hope, for a 12-month to come, Henry Thoreau, a poet whom you may one day be proud of, a noble, manly youth, full of melodies and inventions. We work together day by day in my garden, and I grow well and strong." End quote. Carlyle Emerson, Correspondence, Volume 1, Letter 60. June 6th. I am sometimes discontented with my house because it lies on a dusty road, and with its sills and cellar almost in the water of the meadow. But when I creep out of it into the night or the morning, and see what majestic and what tender beauties daily wrap me in their bosom, how near to me is every transcendent secret of nature's love and religion. I see how indifferent it is where I eat and sleep. This very street of hucksters and taverns the moon will transform to a Palmyra, for she is the apologist of the apologists, and will kiss the elm trees alone and hides every meanness in a silver-edged darkness. Then the good river god has taken the form of my valiant Henry Thoreau here and introduced me to the riches of his shadowy, starlit, moonlit stream, a lovely new world lying as close and yet as unknown to this vulgar trite one of streets and shops as death to life, or poetry to prose. Through one field only we went to the boat, and then left all time, all science, all history behind us, and entered into nature with one stroke of a paddle. "Take care, good friend," I said, as I looked west into the sunset overhead and underneath, and he with his face toward me rowed towards it. "Take care you know not of what you do, dipping your wooden oar into this enchanted liquid, painted with all reds and purples and yellows which glows under and behind you." Presently this glory faded, and the stars came and said, "Here we are," began to cast such private and ineffable beams as to stop all conversation. A holiday villeggiatura, a royal revel, the proudest, most magnificent, most heart-rejoicing festival that valor and beauty, power and poetry ever decked and enjoyed, it is here. It is this. These stars signify it and proffer it. They gave the idea and the invitation. These beguiling stars, soothsaying, flattering, persuading, who, though their promise was never yet made good in human experience, are not to be contradicted, not to be insulted, nay, not even to be disbelieved by us. All experience is against them, yet their word is hope, and shall still forever leave experience a liar. Yes, bright inviters, I accept your eternal courtesy. But on us, sitting darkling or sparkling there in the boat, presently rose the moon. She cleared the clouds and sat in her triumph so maidenly, and yet so queenly, so modest, yet so strong, that I wonder not that she ever represents the feminine to men. There is no envy, no interference in nature. The beauty and sovereignty of the moon, the stars, or the trees do not envy. They know how to make it all their own. As we sail swiftly along, and so cause the moon to go, now pure through her amber vault, and now through masses of shade, and now half hid through the plumes of an oak or a pine, each moment, each aspect is sufficient and perfect. There is no better or worse, no interference, no preference, but every virtuous act of man or woman accuses other men and women, shames me, and the person of every man or woman is in my varying love slighted or preferred. Blessed is law. This moon, the hill, the plant, the air obey a law. They are but animated geometry and numbers. To them is no intemperance. These are through law born, and ripened and ended in beauty. But we through the transgression of law sicken and inveterate. June 7th. Here follow several sentences from the Chaldean oracles attributed to Zoroaster. Things divine are not attainable by mortals who understand body, but only as many as are lightly armed arrive at the summit. It is not proper to understand the intelligible with vehemence, but with the extended flame of an extended mind measuring all things, except that intelligible. But it profits to understand this, for if you incline your mind, you will understand it, not earnestly, but it becomes you to bring with you a pure and inquiring eye, to extend the void mind of your soul to the intelligible, because it subsists beyond mind. You will not understand it as when understanding some particular thing. There is a certain intelligible which it becomes you to understand with the flower of the mind. Let the immortal depth of your soul lead you. Enlarge not thy destiny. To every tree its own leaf and fruit, and every man. Are you a juniper, or are you an orange? But if the tree is pruned and exposed to the south wind and manured, then it will bear a cartload of oranges. If neglected, few and bad. So it seems more the pity, if you are a man of genius, the sweetest of all poets, that you should pine in bad condition, and yield one song in a year. We are too civil to books. For a few golden sentences we will turn over and actually read a volume of 400 or 500 pages, even the great books. Come, say they, we will give you the key to the world. Each poet, each philosopher says this, and we expect to go like a thunderbolt to the center. Ever and forever Heraclitus is justified, who called the world an eternal inchoation. Critics. The borer on our peach trees bores that she may deposit an egg, but the borer into theories and institutions and books bores that he may bore. The man of practical or worldly force requires of the preacher a talent, a force like his own. You defy anybody to have things as good as yours. Hayfitz defies you to show him or put him in a condition inopportune or ignoble. Take all you will, and leave him but a corner of nature, a lane, a den, a cowshed, out of cities, far from letters and taste and culture. He promises to win to that scorned spot the light of moon and stars, the love of men, the smile of beauty, the homage of art. It shall be painted and carved and sung and celebrated and visited by pilgrimage in all time to come. July. The Actual. O Protean nature, whose energy is change evermore, thou hurlest thyself into a berry or a drop, thou lodgest all thought in a word, all moral quality in the glance of an eye. But tell me, art thou only such a creator as bards and orators? Is thy power only for display? Or canst thou change the form of this waste and unnecessary day into an hour of love and fitness? When I see what waste strength is in friendship and in the writing and reading of modern society, the world seems to exist to dilettantism. Osman and Schill. Schill. No tea, no wine. How are you the better, or how am I the worse? Osman. You are wise for me now. I am dull and you are inspired. But I know what you say and shall remember it when you cannot. Schill. How mean you that? Osman. Time is my friend and not yours. The vital force is more ductile than gold, and the coin which you throw into a gambler's hand may be beaten into a leaf which shall gild the globe. Schill. Whilst I confess I come eating and drinking, I praise your self-denial, which I also think is ton and tournure which makes kings vulgar. Osman. It is no virtue in me, sir. My father gave me a good constitution, which makes the taste of berries as grateful to me as pears or pineapples to you, and my temperance is no more to be imputed to me for righteousness than is the fact that a straw hat protects my head for all these years as well as an iron helmet. I think myself master of Assyrian luxury when I walk in the woods through sweet fern and sassafras, or pass to the leeward of an elder bush in flower, or blacken my teeth with the betel nuts we have now plucked. One thing fell from you just now concerning fashion, which, though I did not quite understand it, may be the same thing which I have often thought, that the best teachers of elegance are the stars which shine so delicately in yonder amber sky, and in the presence of the woodland flowers and the birds I am ashamed to be coarse in my costume or behavior. Character. A word warm for the heart written or spoken, that enriches me. I surrender at discretion. I value my welfare too much to pay you any longer the compliment of attentions. I shall not draw the thinnest veil over my defects, but if you are here you shall see me as I am. You will then see that, though I am full of tenderness, and born with as large hunger to love and to be loved as any man can be, yet its demonstrations are not active and bold, but are passive and tenacious. My love has no flood and no ebb, but is always there under my silence, under displeasure, under cold, arid, and even weak behavior. I think not of mean ages, but of Chaldean, Egyptian, or Teutonic ages, when man was not feather-brained, or French, or servile, but if he stooped under ideas, times when the earth spoke and the heavens glowed, when the actions of men indicated vast conceptions, and men wrote histories of the world in prison, and builded like Himalaya and the Alleghany chains. I think that only is real which men love and rejoice in. Men do not today believe in one who ascribes to man the attributes of the soul. Even they who speak that speech will scarcely stick to it, and if a man assert that great mystery, every little scribbler in the newspaper shall make great eyes and point at his own little brain and say, "He is mad," and it may and does happen that the man who spoke it shall flee before the word of this newspaper written by some shallow boy in the dark, who wrote he knew not what, dipping his pen in mire and darkness. And yet night and morning, earth and heaven, and the soul of man are not to be so easily disposed of. It is true that there is another side to man, the other side of fugitiveness, of frailty, that man is moth or bubble or gossamer, they readily hear and say, but that man is necessary and eternal they unwillingly hear. A man must reach the whole extent from heaven to earth, but it is possible that a man may come to subsist in some other way than that which the prudent think of. Hateful it is that transcendent men should only come to us in obscure and lurid forms, and not like sunshine and blue sky. Yet when they come, they will not be reported. They will affect men in a rapturous and extraordinary way, and the last thing they will think of will be to take notes. The age once more should appear capacious, undefinable, far retreating, still renewing, as the depths of the horizon do when seen from the hills. You have many coats in your wardrobe, for you are rich. You need many for your conversation, and your action I am heartily tired of. Old, musty, and stale. But Godfrey, who has but one coat to his back, has as many to his thoughts as nature has days or plants or transformations. July 6th. Ah, ye old ghosts, ye builders of dungeons in the air, why do I ever allow you to encroach on me a moment to win me to your hapless company? In every week there is some hour when I read my commission in every cipher of nature, and know that I was made for another office, a professor of the joyous science, a detector and delineator of occult harmonies and unpublished beauties, a herald of civility, nobility, learning, and wisdom, an affirmer of the one law, yet as one who should affirm it in music or dancing, a priest of the soul, yet one who would better love to celebrate it through the beauty of health and harmonious power. My trees teach me the value of our circumstance or limitation. I have a load of manure, and it is mine to say whether I shall turn it into strawberries or peaches or carrots. I have a tree which produces these golden delicious cones called Bartlett pears, and I have a plant of strong common sense called a potato. The pear tree is certainly a fine genius, but with all that wonderful constructive power it has of turning air and dust, yea, the very dung to Hesperian fruit, it will very easily languish and bear nothing. If I starve it, give it no southern exposure, and no protecting neighborhood of other trees. How differs it with the tree planter? He too may have a rare constructive power to make poems, or characters, or nations, perchance, but though his power be new and unique, if he be starved of his needful influences, if he have no love, no book, no critic, no external call, no need or market for that faculty of his, then he may sleep through dwarfish years and die at last without fruit. Colomb prefers to take work of Edmund Hosmer by the job, "for the days are damn long." Sunday. If I were a preacher, I should carry straight to church the remark Lydian made today, that, "she had been more troubled by piety in her help than with any other fault. The girls that are not pious she finds kind and sensible, but the church members are scorpions, too religious to do their duties, and full of wrath and horror at her if she does them." Every man has had one or two moments of extraordinary experience, has met his soul, has thought of something which he never afterwards forgot, and which revised all his speech and molded all his forms of thought. I resent this intrusion of alterity. That which is done and that which does is somehow, I know, part of me. The unconscious works with the conscious, tells somewhat of which I consciously learn to have been told. What I am has been conveyed secretly from me to another, whilst I was vainly endeavoring to tell him it. He has heard from me what I never spoke. If I should or could record the true experience of my late years, I should have to say that I skulk and play a mean, shiftless, subaltern part much the largest part of the time. Things are to be done which I have no skill to do, or are to be said which others can say better, and I lie by or occupy my hands with something which is only an apology for idleness until my hour comes again. But woe to him who is always successful, who still speaks the best word and does the handiest thing, for that man has no heavenly moment. I find an analogy also in the Asiatic sentences to this fact of life. The Oriental genius has no dramatic or epic turn, but ethical, contemplative, delights in Zoroastrian oracles, and Vedas, and Menu and Confucius. These all-embracing apothegms are like these profound moments of the heavenly life. Lydian says that the only sin which people never forgive in each other is a difference of opinion. Carlyle, with his inimitable ways of saying the thing is next best to the inventor of the thing. Quote, "I, King Sahib, built this pyramid. I, when I had built it, covered it with satin. Let him that cometh after me and says he is equal to me cover it with mats. This is the end of Volume 5 of the Journals of Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is also the end of Part 2 of Journal Collection number 32 by Emerson from the year 1841, when the author was 38 years old. In the next video, we will continue with Journal Collection number 32 and pick up where we left off in the middle of the summer. Thank you for listening.